All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Convo Couch. We have a very special guest today. We finally got her on the show. We've been wanting her for so long. Do I call you Congresswoman McKinney or just Miss McKinney or Cynthia? What shall we call you, Cynthia Mckinney?
Call me Cynthia.
Well, thank you so much for going on the show. I really, it means a lot to us. We've been taking such a pounding for several years now, being election integrity activists, and we always look back to your work and what you went through in Georgia, and it just like kind of lifts our spirits knowing that there's somebody who is in the inside who understands what's going on and is who's covered elections and also just pushed back against the war machine. And I just want to start with the first question. I'll let you go right into a story too as well, because this will probably transition you right into it. Because I was watching a recent interview with you and you said that your dad taught you to never underestimate the wisdom of the people, right?
Oh, yeah.
But you've been out of Congress for a while right now, and everything is so split. Everything is so tribal. You know, the cancel culture has at each other's throats. Do you still have that faith in our citizens, Cynthia?
Man, that's an excellent question, because I to be honest, I question it every day. Every time I see the people standing up and, sort of saying that person is not wearing a mask, or that person, or you need to get the vaccine, or, I see that. And then I question it, but then I also understand the assault that the human intellect is under 365 days of the year, 24 hours of the day, 7 days a week. And so there's a reason that Coca-Cola advertises every day. And that's because, well, maybe if you leave that human intellect to its own devices, it will understand that Coca-Cola is not good for you. Plus, they're bad for the workers as well, but and the environment as well.
Yeah, the environment.
So maybe you will be given a chance to think. And so we're bombarded with this advertising, this propaganda, this mythology. We're bombarded with all of it, so that people don't have a chance to think. I was bicycling across the United States one time. This was back in 2010. And we were in the middle of the desert in Nevada. And this woman who was a waitress, she overheard our conversation. I was with this organization, Bike for Peace. And so our objective was to bike from California to Washington, D.C., stopping in homes and small towns along the way, because we could only go 100 miles, a day. And some of us did far less than that.
That's pretty good, 100 miles.
Especially when we were going through like Utah with all those mountains and things. But anyway, we're in the middle of nowhere, and the waitress overhears our conversation and decides to chime in. And she chimed in with such common sense, such perspicacity, that I said, "How do you know what you know?" She's in the middle of nowhere. And she said, "I listen to what they say, and then I compare my life to what they say." And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's brilliant." So I know that there are people out there who are brilliant in their own way, in their own right. And they just have to have the opportunity, be given the opportunity to think. And if we can create some space so that people can have some thinking time, yes, I still have confidence in the people.
In a recent interview, you mentioned we have a lot of insiders acting like outsiders in Congress, like the Squad, for instance. In your opinion, do we have any friends in DC?
To be honest, no. And I think that is perhaps the hardest lesson that we have to not just understand, but it has to become a part of our political being, that we know that those guys up there are not our friends. And so therefore, we're going to have to take care of down here ourselves, and then do everything within our power to organize and change up there. Until we realize that, we'll think, oh, this one is good on that. So I'm good, but this one is good on that one issue, but maybe bad on 59% of the other issues, but that's okay. So what we do is we accept okay when these people have a responsibility to be 100% committed to us. Nobody else, no other country, no other constituency. It's us. It's we, the people of the United States, to whom our elected representatives must be representative. But unfortunately, that isn't the case, and we have to understand that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when I always go like, what friends do we have in Washington? Well, I guess Rand Paul was going against the Afghan war, but if I'm like a progressive looking at a conservative libertarian and trying to, I mean, we have nothing. We have no help, it seems, at times.
I just wanted to follow up. What do you think is the purpose of people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and the rest of the squad? What do you think is their point? Because to me, it seems like they're not there to take on the establishment. It seems like they're there to replace the old guard with a rebranded version of what the Democratic Party is, with more woke language, but not really anything of substance that's different.
It's called face change instead of regime change. And so the people, though, have been satisfied with face change. And what we have to understand is that we need systemic change. When I say regime change, I mean systemic change. And that's not the kind of change that you can get just by voting this person in who has a different line or maybe a better line. You've got to have true revolutionaries that are elected. Say, for example, I know I shouldn't mention the name, but there was a member of Congress from California. He and I used to conspire. We conspired all the time because, we were revolutionaries, and we knew that just putting out a press release, that's nothing. You actually have to do physical action. And so what we wanted to do was take the streets into the House of Representatives. And so we conspired to do that. And one of the things that we wanted to do, like you're going to have I think it's in Australia and New Zealand, where you've got the trucks that are going and they're just going to stop business. Well, we wanted to do that in the House of Representatives. We just wanted to stop business. And that's another thing. We've got to stop business as usual in our own everyday way. So for example, when, I fly, for the time being, until I'm not allowed to do so anymore, I fly and I opt out of the Michael Chertoff machine. I will not go through the Michael Chertoff machine, holding my hands up and letting them scan my belly and all of that kind of stuff, and think that that's going to contribute to my security, when the biggest threat to our security are the people in Washington, D.C. that sold out. That's the threat to our security, and that's the threat to the Republic. However, I also am in the process of rethinking the Republic. But I wanted to tell you this story, and maybe now is a good time to tell you, because it exemplifies what I'm talking about, each one in their own way stopping business as usual. And I started to say that in Australia and New Zealand, they're having the trucks. They're just going to come in and they're just going to stop things. And that is, I believe, a good thing. So basically what I teach my students in Political Science 101, when I was teaching before the whole coronavirus thing, is that no is the most powerful word in politics. The moment you say no, and in fact, I have a political theorist by the name of Jacques Rancière, a philosopher actually, Jacques Rancière, who believes that real politics doesn't start until people say no. And it's only by saying no that you're able to change what is known as the conventional wisdom into a different wisdom. And that it means that those people, he calls them the un. They are the unseen, the unheard, the invisible, the unimportant, the seemingly unimportant people. When those people are able to formulate a political no, a philosophy that tells them from their soul, from their being, that I can't go along with that, and they stand up and they say no, that's the moment of true politics. And that is also the revolutionary moment where we can change things. So we can have, say, for example, in the 1960s, a lot of the people who you are with, I've met them for the first time in Northern California. Those were the people of the generation that almost won. Well, I shouldn't say we, because I'm just a tad younger than they are, but they were the ones that did the heavy lifting. They were the ones that did the hard work up in Northern California. And they bore the brunt of the repression that came as a result of them almost winning. And that was when, in the COINTELPRO era, during the COINTELPRO era, that was when the United States government resorted to killing its own citizens, because there was such a widespread statement of no to the war, no to social injustice, no to environmental injustice. I mean, there was no's across the board, and people were willing to come together across these lines that, you know, have been successfully lines of division. They were able to come together and forcefully together say that no. So I've seen the power of no. It was so powerful that the United States instituted the COINTELPRO program so that it wouldn't have to say no. And then in Vietnam, the soldiers said no. And when the soldiers said no, I just recently posted this documentary because I looked at it again. I've been going back and revisiting documentaries and old literature that talks about this, and posting the movie versions of this. Sir, No Sir is the documentary where the Vietnam War soldiers said, no, we're not going to fight this war any longer. And it forced a change in US policy. That change was backed up by street action, by public opinion in the United States, where people just basically said no. Unfortunately, when the US government fought its own citizens and fought back, there was a process known now as decapitation. And so basically what this theory was if you cut off the head of the organization, then you can kill the organization and therefore you can kill the movement. And so through this process of decapitation, the whole movement for social justice, economic justice, environmental justice, and peace was destroyed.
Wow. I mean, well, I mean, and this is why we love you, because you have the ability to say no, and you've said no before. But I just want to tell you, Cynthia, that it's a shame that people can't say no. In fact, like the Democratic recall over here, or the governor recall of Gavin Newsom, you see progressives keep on saying, we got to vote for Gavin because it could be a lot worse the other way. In other words, they're not even fighting for incremental wins anymore. They're fighting for incremental losses. It's nothing that the guy will give you. He'll give you nothing. He won't give you Medicare for all, but the other guy will never give it to you. And the other guy's so awful that we have to vote this way. So they're actually, yeah.
No. I was just going to say they're powerful inducements to say yes. And they're powerful inducements for the status quo. And if you are a weak person who hasn't investigated your own psyche and your own motivations and your own values, and this gets back to the me time, the time to think. And if you don't take that time to think, to take stock of who you are and what motivates you and what your values are, then you can fall prey to the yes. So for example, we have politicians today, they are in every sense of the word politicians. They are not public servants, and they have become accustomed to saying yes because they have grown accustomed to taking the rewards. For example, when Hurricane Katrina occurred, and the whole world was looking at, the United States' inability to protect its own citizens, let alone in September 11th, the United States didn't protect its own citizens either. But in Hurricane Katrina, sort of things, the myths, the lies were all laid bare for the world to see. And I wanted to stand up and say, we are elected because we should represent policy change. We should not represent the status quo just because we're elected officials. And so there was a panel that was created to investigate the failure around multiple failures around Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And I had one very well-known, very outspoken Congresswoman say to me, after saying, no, I'm not going to join the panel, Cynthia, you just have to accept that when the leadership tell us to do something, we're going to do it. So now, what kind of leaders are these? These are not leaders, these are followers. These are not followers only, because there's even a science to being a good follower. These are cowards. Ooh. And that's what we have to understand, that we have elected officials, the very people we are told to look up to are actually cowards.
You go number 4, please.
Oh. Well, what are your thoughts on the censorship that's happening right now? With government and big tech, we have a mass surveillance state. We also have we can't question anything regarding what's going on with COVID. You can't question elections. You're labeled a domestic violent extremist. All these things are happening right now. And in addition, what do you think about Julian Assange and what that represents for all of this happening right now, especially if we, tie that in terms of what he said about Afghanistan 10 years ago?
Well, Julian Assange represents the tragedy of what the United States has become. And, I can only commend the people who continue to go out to where he's imprisoned and they protest. Those protests still take place. the vigils, the online vigils still take place. And how long has it been? So Julian Assange, thank goodness he was able to have 2 children, and there's some rays of hope in his life. But Julian Assange gave us everything, and they've taken everything from him because he did.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's a point of sadness for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why people aren't hip to it and they don't understand how important Julian Assange is.
Well, you know, I tried to use WikiLeaks documents in my dissertation. And the interesting thing was that we searched and searched and searched and searched, and we were only able to find one other dissertation. This is 2015. That had used WikiLeaks sources, and it was closed. It was sealed. It was not available for public review. And so basically I was told my dissertation has to be available for public review, which means that you have to take all of the WikiLeaks references out. And so that's what I had to do. I had to remove every reference that I was able to glean from the WikiLeaks documents. I had to remove them all from my dissertation.
Wow,
Yeah, well.
that's crazy. What just to follow up really quick, how important is acknowledging the mass surveillance state right now that we're living in? I mean, it seems to me that the government and the state agencies keep growing and growing and growing and merging with big tech. It's like a new era where we have big tech merging with the state agencies, and then, you know, there's so much nefariousness going on with these oligarchs.
So you mentioned Rand Paul earlier, and Rand Paul has done a wonderful thing in speaking out on, say, the mass, or you got to do this and you got to do that. But, you know, I'm looking at the power of a senator. And a single senator can actually stop business as usual. And that's more like what we need a single senator to use his or her authority in a way that stops business as usual. And until that happens, I'm thinking of right now about the hold and the use of the hold. They're also talking about the filibuster. And I support the filibuster because I believe that the filibuster should not be dismantled. It should be protected for the protection of the minority voice, whether it comes from the fact that I used to represent, or I come from a state that would utilize the filibuster. And I understand the history of the filibuster and how it was used by the Dixiecrats in order to stop civil rights legislation. But does that mean that we throw it away? No, I don't think we need to throw it away. We need to elect more people, or maybe we can't even elect them any longer because the electronic voting machines, and you're talking about surveillance, but who's going to stop the surveillance? It seems as if every way you turn, every place you look, there's a problem with the integrity of our system, which has led me to think about ways in which we can replace a republic. Because no matter where you look around the world, those governance systems that have been adopted that are republics, they're in crisis. And they're in crisis. One of the terms that we use for this crisis is kakistocracy, where the most unprepared, the most unethical, the most unready people are the ones who are able to gain power and control over the system. So we have a kakistocracy. We also have a psychopathocracy. Greg Caton coined that term, psychopathocracy. So when you have the kakistocracy and you have good people not willing to use the power that they have in order to stop the bad people, then the psychopaths are the ones who are willing to use the power and use the system, the flaws in the system, in order to gain power. And then when they have state control, they have state power, the result is what we're seeing now, where you're forced to take a jab and you don't even know what's in it. I saw a doctor open up the insert to the so-called vaccine, which is not really a vaccine, but she opened up the insert and it was blank. It was blank. I think it was the Johnson & Johnson one. It was blank. So you don't even know what they're jabbing into you. First of all, you don't even know what the illness is that is the precursor to the jab, and then you don't know what's in the jab. And then you're told that the Yale University, I think, did a study of, what are the behavioral marketing techniques that we need to use in order to convince people to take a jab. So rather than just being honest, I mean, whatever happened to honest governance? So it's led me to believe that the era of republics is over and the era for any kind of indirect democracy is over. There are enough of us who have not taken the jab. That means that we've sat back and we've taken time to think. And those of us who have taken the time to think understand that no one can represent our interests better than we represent our interests ourselves. That is an argument for direct democracy.
That's awesome. And before we get further into the jab, because we don't even know where it came from, they haven't been honest about alternative medicines. I mean, we took ivermectin. We can tell you all about it. But let's also talk about elections, because you did talk about the electronic voting machine. So if you got a chance to do one reform, just one reform to our national election system, what would it be? And also the second part of the question, how much do the Democrats and Republicans work behind closed doors when it comes to our elections?
Okay. Let me talk about policies together and then voting. Okay, so what I would do for the administration of elections, I would have paper ballots, and I would not have an army of paid election officials. We, the people, would be the election officials. And so just like the jury pool, and juries change based on, one trial and then you're out. So you'd have one election and you're out. And so random selection of individuals who will conduct the election properly and who will make sure that the elections are tallied properly. There would be no electronic voting machines. That's not to say that it's impossible to have voting machines that are fair, but we don't need them. And right now we can't trust them. And we can't trust the political parties that administer them. Therefore, we the people need to be in charge of the balloting process, the voting process, and the tallying process afterwards.
Nice. And the Republicans and Democrats behind closed doors? Because I heard somebody say,
well, let me tell you a story. The story
I love stories.
So I'm a true believer. I got elected and, I ran as a Democrat. I believed in the Democratic Party, and I'm a true believer. I go up to Capitol Hill, and my chairman, I'm on the International Relations Committee, and my chairman calls a hearing. So I truck on up to the hearing, and it's supposed to be a doozy because, they're supposed to be back and forth. And, it's like we Democrats were in charge at that time. We Democrats vehemently oppose this policy. So the witness comes, and they're supposed to be, as I think about it, I think it might have been split so that the administration witness would have been a Republican and the House would have been a Democrat. So the House, the Democrats were in charge. And the chairman is going after this guy, and I'm saying, whoa, just like that, this is what I'm talking about. And then after the hearing is over, the witness and the chairman walk out together, arm in arm. It was all theater. And so then I was like depressed for a whole week because it really demonstrated to me just exactly what Washington, D.C. was all about. So you have to understand that this is theater. And then once you understand that it's theater, you can disregard everything that is said and look only at what they do. What is the language of the legislation that they vote on? Who votes on that legislation? Who votes for it? Who takes a walk? My problem with Tulsi Gabbard was that every time there was a legislation of substance, she would take a walk. She was absent. You're not there to abstain. You're not there to take a walk. You're there to take a stand on the tough issues, even if it's a so-called, quote unquote, money bill where a lot of money has been passed around to vote a certain way.
So I recently went to Peru to cover their elections, and I noticed, they have 0 electronic voting machines. I also noticed that they require voting IDs. And it's like that in the vast majority of the world. And doing the research, we know that the vast majority of countries do not have absentee ballots or, mail-in ballots, as definitely do not have any form of ballot harvesting. But there's been a lot of criticism from the right on that. But on the left, anytime you criticize that, you're disenfranchising voters. So what are your overall thoughts on mass mail out ballots as a whole? And also this tactic that when Republicans try to add reforms to strengthen the chain of custody, right? Because there's a chain of custody, and then there's also the convenience of the facility of voting. So they're labeled as racist by not just Democrats now, but also by the progressive and more leftist contingent in the political world.
I think your experience in Peru it was probably an eye-opener for you, because if you don't know what it's like to cast a vote in other parts of the world, then it's easy to fall for the lines that are thrown out here about racist and da. But I, because of my beliefs and my political behavior, I'm punished, so I can't get a job in the US. And so I have to go overseas to get work. And so when I was out of the country, I witnessed the elections several times, and I saw how difficult it is to, it's not that it's difficult to cast a vote, but what you have to do in order to prove your fitness to vote, I should say. And here in the United States, we've got the Democrats. For example, you've got Stacey Abrams talking about she's supposed to be the savior for the Black vote, but she wants undocumented people, immigrants, to be able to vote in local elections. Now, I just wonder, what is this all about? So it's not that they have very low standards for who can get to vote. I think the Democrats have no standards for who gets to vote and who also gets to count the vote. So they knew that the electronic voting machines were run on proprietary software, meaning that public dollars are used to buy machines that are privately owned, privately maintained, and privately tabulated with the votes. And yet they went along with it. And in fact, it was Democrats in the state of Georgia. Georgia was the first state to deploy these electronic voting machines, and it was Democrats that went along with this. And 80% of the votes that were tabulated, I'm sure you guys know this already, but between ES&S and Diebold, is one family. It's the Urosevich brothers. So, I mean, you have one family controlling 80% of the machines on which US people cast their votes. It's outrageous. And then when you say, okay, I want to see the election data because there's some anomalies, as there were in my elections, people all over the state of Georgia were voting in the 4th congressional district race, but the 4th congressional district race was not all over the state of Georgia. We had people in South Georgia voting. We had people in city of Atlanta, and I didn't represent South Georgia, nor did I represent city of Atlanta, and people were voting there. And this was told to us by the election officials. And so, but then when you sue, the state of Georgia in court has a expert witness who testifies that, well, you just have to trust that the person we announce is the winner is the winner. So Bev Harris at Black Box Voting called it blind faith voting. And that's what the United States people engage in, blind faith voting. And I think that's no place, the voting is so central to our form of governance that if you can't trust it, you can't trust the governance. And that is exactly where we are now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm so, you touched my heart there because finally somebody mentioned the words proprietary software. It's like, that is the biggest thing. Like, you know, and obviously, you know, we can talk about, you kind of mentioned the fact that we could have a fair tabulation machine. We don't necessarily need it. We could have open source. We can go that way. But I also want to throw my a shout out to our boy, Garland Favorito, who has produced such great results in Georgia with a small team, a small little volunteer team to produce the results and showing the people out there through the ballot images on how cheating can take place. And the last question about elections real quick too, because since we're talking about Georgia, and I've been out there twice, and I plan to go a third time to meet up with Garland and talk to a lot of witnesses out there. What are your thoughts also about these ballot boxes that are out in the middle of nowhere with no chain of custody whatsoever? I know a lot of progressives, once again, they think it's accessibility, it's fair, it's easy to vote, it's convenient, but they don't understand there's no camera on this thing and there's no chain of custody.
It's ridiculous. I mean, you know, I think the Democrats got together and figured out, well, we need to win this election and we're going to stuff as many ballot boxes as we can in order to win the election. And I think that's what happened. There was absolutely zero integrity, and we've seen it. I can't remember the year now when Hillary ran and the Jill Stein did the
Michigan 2016.
2016, yeah. And basically Hillary's numbers went down. What on the recount? Why did they go down? Because she used the black, and this is something I just totally despise, is that she used the Black community to perpetrate the fraud in the election. And that's what I hate. So she ended up with fewer votes because there had been that ballot stuffing in the Black community. And that's what they did again this time. And I'm sick and tired of the Black community being the butt of Democratic Party aspirations without policy change to benefit the Black community.
Yeah.
100%. What did you think of this last election with Donald Trump and Biden? Did you think that it was the most democratic election of our time? Because Nancy Pelosi said it, and you know what Pelosi says must be true.
Oh my gosh, where's Cindy Sheehan? She ran against Nancy, and we need somebody. We really do. We just need we need better candidates. The problem is, and when you talk about the squad, I didn't have anybody hand me $20 million to recruit candidates, to start an alternative media outlet. Nobody gave me that kind of money. If they did, we'd have far different and better results for the people.
Oh yeah.
So the problem is that the line of individuals willing to sell out is very long. And so you knock out, that policy of decapitation that I was telling you about. And so it was very much like Operation Gladio. I can think about Operation Gladio over in Europe, where they were bombing and doing things and even kidnapped Aldo Moro. And and it turned out that it was the CIA that was doing it. So you have Operation Gladio, the CIA took over these very progressive, maybe you would say radical organizations, like, for example, the Red Brigades. At one point, if you look at Time Watch, I believe is the name of the documented BBC series on Operation Gladio, and you have them, and they say that Red Brigades wasn't the Red Brigades because the CIA had gone in and cleaned out through its own techniques. The true members of Red Brigades, they were all in prison. And so all of the bombing, the strategy of tension that was carried out by the CIA was carried out by the CIA under the name of the Red Brigades. And so that's what we have. We have these organizations that have been taken over, infiltrated. If you look at COINTELPRO, infiltration was the #1 methodology used by the FBI to destroy organizations and to decapitate the leadership of these organizations, of this social movement that was happening at that time. And so then they replaced them with their own people. That's what is happening now. That's the value of the squad. It's not that we finally were able to get revolutionaries in place. It's that the revolutionaries were rooted out. There's a book. Let me see if I have that book handy, called Obama Mania. And yeah, here it is. Can you see it?
Kind of, because of the screen.
Because of the thing. Yeah. Okay. Can you see it now? It's a little better.
Yeah.
Okay. It's called What's Wrong with Obama Mania? And in this, there's one chapter, and the author is Ricky Jones, a professor in Kentucky. And he talks about the role that Obama played. It was a replacement proposition. So you have people who are uncompromising on certain values, like me, and then you replace them with people who are totally compromised. Now, the public doesn't see this because they see one Black face replaces another Black face, or a white face in the case of Mike Capuano in Massachusetts. He was in the House of Representatives before the Squad. And then that white male face is replaced with a Black female face. And so that's supposed to be marked as progress. But is it progress in terms of our ideology? That's the question that we have to start asking. Is it real progress ideologically? And what you find out is no, it's just a bait and switch. It's a pig and a poke. It's everything except the real change that people think that they're supporting and voting for.
Number 8, foreign policy time.
All right, so let's get to the foreign policy, which is the other part of why we love you. You've been in opposition to the imperial war machine your whole life. What are your thoughts on the way some progressives are praising Biden for his quote unquote pullout in Afghanistan? They're saying he is the most progressive president of our time. When we know Joe Biden wrote the Patriot Act, Joe Biden has been for every single war that he's ever been around. So it just seems a little bit weird to me to see this whole like desire to just give him so much credit for something he helped create as one of the architects of the imperial war machine.
Oh my gosh. There's very little I can say because Joe Biden just takes my breath away.
And not in a good way.
Not in a good way. No. It's really an insult to the people, I believe, to have Joe Biden in the White House. And I still, to this very minute, cannot believe that man is carrying the mantle of President of the United States.
Yeah.
I just can't say anything else.
Yeah. All right. Well, the last question, because foreign policy, we have just 2 other questions about COVID. So in the global South, the establishment is always about pushing regime change. And, it's always about resource extraction. And at the end of the day, it's the enforcement of the monetary system, the central banks, the IMF on the people of the global South, pretty much with austerity measures. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin? And now that Bitcoin is going to El Salvador to try to change the game. Omar Gaddafi was killed because he started his own currency. I still can't believe that Bukele, the president of Salvador, is making this move. I mean, he is being smart leaving the American dollar there, but he's taking in another currency. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin?
Well, he's not dead. So that might tell us something. Yeah. And if you look very closely at Bitcoin, maybe Bitcoin was a precursor. There is a bit of uncertainty as to, well, first of all, we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto, whatever his name is. Yeah. We don't know who he is. There are some people who are claiming that they are he, but we don't know if that's the truth or not. And then I've read several articles about the National Security Agency having some role in digital currency, sort of its creation at the creation. I don't know anything about that, but I do know that the Bitcoin itself has been put on an upward trajectory. And but there are people who have vast holdings. And so now I don't know, you call these people whales, and I'm wondering, it's not decentralized as it says. It's not a medium of exchange as the white paper indicated that this digital currency ought to be. So what exactly is Bitcoin, and as opposed to the other digital currencies? I think that the young people who have been attracted and have become very wealthy as a result of their initial adoption of not only Bitcoin, but all of the other alternate digital currencies, I think they are idealistic. but the bad guys are still there present in Bitcoin. So I don't have faith in Bitcoin. And there are very few places I can spend my Bitcoin if, it's as a dollar. So it's, if you're going to hold it and you hold it, then maybe you can make quite a bit of money. My son asked me, should he invest in Bitcoin? And I told him no, quite frankly, because one, we haven't established. So there's some advantages to cash. Cash is, we know the disadvantages, but cash is also anonymous. I can spend my cash anonymously and folk don't know what I've bought. But that's not the case with Bitcoin because the blockchain records, and especially if you're using an exchange, then the exchange has all of the information on you and your wallet, and therefore it's traceable on the blockchain and it's forever there. So I don't know that is the Bitcoin is where we want to go. There are some anonymous cryptocurrencies, but I don't know if I can use them as cash, Dash and Monero. I don't know enough about them, but I know if I were going to be in cryptocurrency, I would probably go to Dash and Monero just because of the anonymity with which you can spend it.